Pokémon card GB2. Here Comes Team GR is a 2001 sequel to the 1998 RPG that was released internationally in the year 2000. The game has a very straightforward story and concept. Team Great Rocket has been stealing Pokemon trading cards and kidnapping the masters of the clubs. It's the player's job to stop them, and ultimately the job of your rival Ronald, but he's only a rival, so not likely. You do this by, believe it or not, playing the Pokemon trading card game. Definitely not a deep story, but it fulfills its role of keeping you from wandering around aimlessly. For a very brief breakdown of how the gameplay works, if you aren't already familiar with it, play Pokemon onto the field, attach energy cards to them to perform attacks, and knock out your opponent's Pokemon to draw from your pile of prize cards. After the players picked up all of their prize cards, knocked out all of their opponent's active and benched Pokemon, or has their opponent run out of cards in their deck and become unable to draw, they win the game. This is the TCG in its early years. I myself haven't played since the early black and white format, but from what I've heard, and feel free to tell me how it really is in the comments if I got any of this wrong, the game has continued to move toward a focus on big basic Pokemon and a faster pace. I remember in my brief time playing competitively the stronger EX Pokemon that gave up 2 of your 6 prize cards if they were knocked out almost entirely dominated the game. I'm not necessarily saying that's a bad thing, but if you yourself want to experience the game with a slower pace, then why not try the game with an exclusive Moltres with 100 HP and 1 attack with 50% chance of doing 70 damage or nothing. Quite the difference there. That could apply to the first game as well. What about the sequel makes it different from its predecessor? The obvious addition, more cards, come from the Team Rocket expansion. Something I find rather odd about that is that, according to Bulbapedia, the Rocket Gang expansion came out in 1997 in Japan. By December 10th, 1999, over a full year prior to this game's March 2001 release date, all of the Gym Leader sets and the first set to feature Pokemon from the Johto region have been released. I have some wild speculations about its possible relation to why it wasn't released internationally, but I'll save that for the wild but not actually that unreasonable speculation segment. So what else is here? Well, like a lot of the games that came out after Pokemon Crystal, you can play as a girl. Then there's Team Great Rocket's Island, which doesn't just have more of the same to prolong the length of the game. The island does quite a bit to break up the monotony of just using one deck for each area. Opponents in each floor will have different conditions for battles, like having a certain number of a specific card in your deck, using only one Pokemon type, or even changing up some of the rules. Not being able to use the same deck for the entire game forces more deck building and using different styles for a more varied experience playing the game. But the biggest addition was a feature people remember fondly from the first 4 generations: gambling. It's the kind I say is finally remembered because you're trying to get in-game content using in-game tokens for currency with zero attachment to actual money. It's almost kind of funny how Pokemon has had to get rid of its slot machines in recent years, while video games have gotten worse about what's arguably actual gambling. And by funny, I mean, no, not really. And if you do classify it as gambling, then even Pokemon has moved away from pretend to actually doing it. But hey, this is the positive part of the game review, so let's get back to that. The Game Center features slots that you don't actually control, a gauntlet where you wager chips on your battles, and a coin flip game that I just never managed to win that Mew card from. I have probably over an hour of this game being recorded, but I did get the bonus round in slots, so there's that. Counting the amount of time I spent gambling, leaving the game idle for a few minutes, and playing parts of the post-game, I've put in about 20 hours into the game. Presentation-wise, I would mention the nice artwork, which a lot of work must have gone into, and the nice soundtrack that's easy to want to listen to outside of the game, but this is a Pokemon game. If you know the series, then you know that tends to go without saying. So, I had a lot of fun with the game, but are there any complaints? Well, yes, but really just the one and maybe a nitpick. The biggest issue for me was the fact that using cards in the deck made them unavailable for other decks to use. So, for example, if I want to use a full set of Professor Oak, a pretty useful card, I have to have 4 copies of it. But if I try to build another deck, for say the purpose of meeting special conditions, without dismantling the earlier deck, I need to have another 4 copies of that card. You can save deck recipes, but it still isn't as easy as it could have been. That's one thing I'm glad digital card games have moved away from. You can save deck lists with the cards in your collection, and none of your decks get in the way of each other. What might be more of a nitpick is the battles that require specific cards. I didn't have a problem with them at first, but then I reached an opponent who required me to play a full set of Mysterious Fossil, 4 cards I didn't have. His buddy in the same room gives packs from the set that does have the card if you beat him, but having to repeatedly do this when I was trying to progress through the story wasn't very fun. For the reason why this wasn't released in English, my initial thinking, and also the really obvious conclusion that everyone else already came to, but I didn't hear about it until after I looked into it, so you're darn right I'm going to mention it, is the release of the Game Boy Advance in Japan the week prior, and internationally just 3 months later. The Game Boy Color stopped getting new games in North America in November of 2002, so it's pretty obvious how quickly the focus shifted to the next handheld. As for the number of new cards included, maybe it was some combination of fitting the Rocket theme and the time it might take to program all these cards into the game. And I can speak from experience, it's nice to hand the game cards and then see it actually use them right. But really your guess is as good as mine. Pokemon Card GB2 is a very nice sequel. I consider it very comparable to Gold and Silver in that it's what people would ideally want to see from a sequel. It expands upon the original. The game also isn't just a quick rehash done to make a quick buck. I no longer have my original review of the Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Monsters games uploaded, but for the ones on Game Boy Color, that was a set of 3 sequels released in the span of 2 years, and boy it shows. This was essentially the opposite situation, and it nicely builds off the original instead of adding next to nothing substantial. This could have very well gone the same way, but thankfully it didn't. Pokemon Card GB2 is a game that still holds up to this day. It's somewhat of a shame that the series never continued beyond the first sequel though. Sure, there have been other Pokemon card game video games since, and I think it's kind of a weird phrase to hear, but none of them have been full-fledged RPGs like this. Whether you're new to the game or you've been with it since day one, this is an easy recommendation for anyone. Thank you for watching.